Good evening, everybody. Before we officially open up the council meeting, I'd like to just make a small statement. To the effect that it's with deep sadness and heavy hearts that we inform you that the death of our employee, co-worker, colleague, friend, Mark Yard, who unexpectedly passed away on Saturday, August 7th, 2021. We'll miss Mark more than words can express. A come and go celebration of life in memory of Mark will take place at the Municipality Memorial Community Center on Wednesday, August 11th, 2021, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Please remember that masks are mandatory and physical distance is still in effect. Before we move to the council meeting, I would like to take a moment in silence. Mark. Okay. Officially open up the council meeting. We'll call the meeting order at 6:32. Take note of the councillors present: Councillor Reese, Councillor Bill Chason, Councillor Hatfield. The mayor will be away due to personal problems, so I'll be acting here tonight. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Does anybody have any pecuniary interest? If so, please advise and state the general nature of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, let's move to the next item of the agenda. Approval of agenda. Can I have a mover? Councillor Hatfield. All in favor? Motion carried. We have number 4, delegations and presentations. We have one presentation from Ms. Beverly Boyd regarding community safety and well-being plan. Are we ready to start that?
I'm having difficulty hearing, so Pat, I'm not sure if you're speaking to me or not.
I'm just looking at the board, looking for your pretty face.
Here we go. It's going to take a minute.
Are you loading it up or am I? Kathy?
It doesn't matter to me. I can put it up on the screen if you wish.
Yeah, that's fine. If you would go ahead and do it, that'd be great. I could put it up, but. Oh,
I'm going to bring it back to the beginning. My apologies. Go ahead.
that's perfect. So just thank you for giving me the opportunity to do a presentation regarding the plan that we've been working on for the past, I guess, 8 months or so. We actually started it prior to that, but with the pandemic, things kind of went askew. So it is the Municipality of Wawa's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. And so what, can I change the slides myself, Kathy, or do you need to?
I think I will need to. I'm going to change the speaker. Just bear with me.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, so can everybody hear me okay now? Okay, I'm assuming you can, although I haven't heard that. So what the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan is all about was the Ministry of the Solicitor General back I guess it was in 2019, they're developing a new Ontario Police Services Act. And part of that has a requirement that municipalities have to develop and adopt a community safety and wellbeing plan, working in partnership with an advisory committee. And they provided quite a lot of material that we could look at, a framework for doing the plan, and quite a lot of information. But what they really wanted was to achieve sustainable communities where everyone is safe, has a sense of belonging, opportunities to participate, and where individuals and families are able to meet their needs for education, healthcare, food, housing, income, and social and cultural expression. And they say the success of society is linked to the well-being of each and every individual. And so Wawa, along with all the other communities in our province, was charged with creating a safety and well-being plan. Slide, please. So the framework that they gave us had 4 things. Now, I'm assuming at this point that everybody has had an opportunity to have a look at the report. It was sent out, and I hope you all took some time to read it, because I'm not going to go through everything. We'll spend most of the time on the action plan itself. We only have 20 minutes, so there's not a ton of time. So the framework was incident response, risk intervention, prevention, and social development. So all the things that we looked at fell within those categories. Next slide. So how did Wawa and Area Victim Services get involved? So as the executive director of WAVES, we understood that our local communities, not only Wawa, but White River, Dubreuilville, Chaplin, Hornepayne, may not have the resources to commit to this. It was another activity that communities had to do, and they were not giving funds or anything to, or the resources to do this. And as WAVES has a presence in all those communities from Chaplin to Hornepayne, and we work directly with the police and medical or hospital personnel, we thought we might be a good fit to help coordinate this. We're familiar with the various players who would be involved with the advisory committee. And one of the things that we're always doing is looking for proactive ways to improve our community. And so we volunteered to coordinate and to help develop this report. Slide. So there were a few barriers. Initially, we didn't really think about barriers, with the exception that many of the individuals and organizations involved in the development of one plan are going to be involved in the development of 3 plans. And so because, you know, these organizations service not only Wawa, but they also service Hornepayne or White River and Dubreuilville, they were going to be very busy attending a lot of meetings. So time was a concern. And many of these organizations were already short of staff. So some of the organizations that we really wanted involved really could not spend a lot of time or dedicate staff to this project. Competing resources between communities. So people who, let's say, were representing the community, Canadian Mental Health Association, they work not only in Wawa, but they also work in White River and Dubreuilville. And so it would be difficult for them to come to a zillion meetings. And there were no funds given. So for many of them, funds were not only being, were not there, but we had to put any plan into action at a low cost. So that had to be a factor. We couldn't be coming up with a whole lot of actions that were going to cost a lot of money. And that was also a bit of a barrier. Next slide, please. But we did find that we did have some barriers. The first one, of course, being COVID-19 came in and everything changed. people were either working from home or not at all. The way they worked was very different, and the focus for many became the pandemic, and they were not remotely concerned about the community safety and well-being plan. It's not that they didn't care about it, but they had other priorities. And also our own staff here at Waves, we were getting accustomed to a new way of working. We weren't always in the office every day. And lots of times, we would have one person in the office and nobody else. And it was quite an interesting time. And I'm sure, at the municipality, that was also obvious that things were really changing. Next slide. Some of the advantages that we had. So the individuals and organizations were accustomed to working together. As a matter of fact, the very first meeting that we had, everybody who was there knew one another pretty much. There were some people from White River that we were just getting to meet, but we were well aware of the services that were in the community. And one thing that was notable was that the ideas that came up at that meeting really were the same things that we ended up with in our plan. They were concerned about mental health. They were concerned about addictions. They were concerned about housing. They were concerned about youth. So those were the primary concerns that were arisen. And we kind of ended up sticking with them. One of the other advantages was information that we garnered at one meeting was used for the next meeting with a different community. Because we had so many of the same players at one meeting, their input, even though they weren't able to maybe attend the next meeting, they had given their input already. And so we were able to help people with their time management, in that only at the beginning did we have everybody at the table all the time. And then as we started to branch out and do individual communities, that information, even if they weren't able to make each meeting, we had already got so much of the information from them. And something that became an advantage, although we didn't really think of it as such when we started, was that Zoom became the way of working. It costs $200 a year to use Zoom as often as you want and as long as you want. So we were able to hold all the meetings we wanted, and we didn't have travel costs. We didn't have meal costs. We didn't have to worry about rent for space to hold meetings or any of that. Everything was done on computer by Zoom. And so we could be meeting with people from White River and Duberville and Wawa all at the same time, people in their own offices or at home. And so the cost that would be normally associated with something like this was almost negligible. Next slide. So we did get some input from the community. We got census information. We got policing stats. We did a survey in which we didn't get as much response as we would have liked for Wawa, but we still got quite a bit. And we did some asset mapping. We also did get information from the schools, who just provided us with some information on the number of kids that they have and that type of information. So the hospital was able to provide us with a little bit of information that is not actually in the report because it wasn't set up like that, but we did get some good information from the community. Next slide. So the format, I'm sure you all seen it. We started with some background information, messages from Mayor Ron Rohde and our CEO, Maury. We did community snapshots, just some basic information about the communities. And then we talked about the current state, including concerns within the framework. So for instance, in instant response, we looked at what our police state was like, fire response, and hospital. And then we have the appendix of information at the end. Next slide, please. So this is where I guess I'll try and spend most of my time, although I'm very quickly using up my time. So the plan, so the incident response, we felt that with the hospital and the fire response was good. We didn't see any real issues with that. In each of the communities, we did talk about the policing. And for the most part, everybody was reasonably happy with it. You know, there was some talk about having police serving in the community a little bit more, getting to see officers on the street, that type of stuff. But as you know, you can imagine, while they were doing the setting up the whole new act, they were also working on the and with the act, they were talking about setting up of these boards. So Wawa is served by the Superior East OPP, and the Ministry of the Solicitor General is currently working to establish the new Ontario Police Services Act. And part of this act, each detachment is going to have a board which may have representation from the communities which it serves. And so the municipality of Wawa is determined to have representation on that board. And that will give us an opportunity to have some input into the type of policing that we might get, and at least have a say into what our expectations are. And so at this point, we've said that that's something the municipality of Wawa will do. And we expect something to happen with that either in the winter of 2021 or into 2022, as soon as the Ministry of the Solicitor General finalizes all of those plans. Next slide. Risk intervention, and this is probably where we did the most work or had the most actions. There's a lot of concern about mental health and addictions in our community, not only for those who are, you know, highly visible and suffering from mental health problems, but also just the general public. You may not realize, you may not know that they're suffering, but there's a lot of people who really do need some help. So the first one is the Lady Dunn Health Center and the OPP have already developed a protocol for assessing the safe bed in the hospital for patients with mental health issues. Now, this had not been done when we first started the plan, but it was one of the things that we had talked about. And the Lady Dunn Health Center had been working at getting this safe bed in place. And so just recently, they actually developed this protocol in the last couple of months. And so we want to provide information to enhance awareness of the LDHC safe bed to area organizations and professionals. So if there's somebody who really is maybe in need of some care, but they don't really need to go to the mental hospital in Sault Ste. Marie or the unit at Superior Sault Area Hospital, but they need to be watched for a while. They need someone to care for them. So they could go to the safe bed if the police recommend it. And so that's something that the Lady Dunn Health Center and the Superior's OPP have done. And we expect it to be used. If it's not already being used, it'll be used like shortly. Next slide, please. And this one is, you know, all of the communities are looking at this one. There is an identified shortage of medical and mental health professionals in the area. Attracting and retaining these professionals has proved to be difficult. So Northern Algoma Counseling has been looking for a counselor for a long time now. Our addictions counselor left early this year and is now working privately in the community. She has actually been replaced, but this person will not start until September. Add to that the shortage of physicians that has occurred with the with Dr. Schaffer and Robinson's leaving, and so they have developed a Wawa and area medical staff recruitment and retention committee. So all of the communities and industry and organizations have come together to form this committee, and we're recommending to them to include not only medical professionals, but mental health professionals in their strategy to recruit and retain organizations and industry, and to employ a multi-pronged strategy. So we are anticipating that that's going to start this fall. And hopefully the municipalities, once they make that recommendation to this committee, they will actually start to consider not only physicians, but also other medical and mental health professionals. Next slide. So they have what they call the mobile crisis response unit that's available through Sioux Area Hospital, but it appears that it's used infrequently. And so we have a couple of volunteers in Wawa who carry a phone, and if there's a mental health crisis, they can be called. They can be called by the hospital, they can be called by family members, they can be called by police, but it doesn't seem that it's that people are well aware of it. In fact, often I've been up to the hospital and asked the physicians, have you called them? And especially if they're locums, they don't, even know that it exists. So WAVES has sometimes assisted with those, but we're really not mental health professionals. We do what we can, but we're probably not the best ones there. So we're hoping that the Canadian Mental Health Association will recommend to Sioux Area Hospital to review and enhance their crisis intervention services, including the mobile crisis unit in our community. So really encourage them to maybe beef it up a little bit and make sure that people are well aware that that service is available. Next slide. The other issue is there's no peer support with the exception of Iris's place in our community. Now, our community is very small, and so we're not really sure how well this one would actually go. So we're asking that the Canadian Mental Health Association to investigate the feasibility of providing peer support for mental health patients. So that would be if somebody was going to show up at the hospital here in Wawa, that there would be peer support there. And if they were released from the hospital in Sault Ste. Marie, that there would be some peer support here when they returned. So we're looking at perhaps that happening in early 2022. One comment I did want to make here, though, when we talk about the Canadian Mental Health Association, the woman who's the lead in that has had a personal tragedy in her family. And so she's been unavailable for the last, say, 6 weeks or so. And I'm not quite sure when she'll be back full time at work. So we'll be hopefully working with her to get this going. Next slide, please. And of course, the one that we all know about is the housing. Everybody's looking for housing in our community, not only in Wawa, but in all of the areas, all of the communities around here, looking for either housing for houses or even rental units. And there's really just not very much available. And there is a reluctance to develop lots that are served in the community due to the cost of purchasing them. So the plan here is that the municipality and the Economic Development Corporation will develop a partnership with a housing developer to increase the number of houses either for rent or for sale. And we expect that to begin this fall. And our next slide, please. So another one is that there is some concern that some of the housing that is available, particularly to our low income tenants, is substandard. And it may not be up to just up to any sort of standard. And we're not just talking about looking good, but being safe. And so the municipality's bylaw officer will increase inspections of rental housing to ensure it's up to local standards. And that, if it hasn't begun already, will begin this fall. Next slide, please. There's also some uncertainty as to whether or not potential landlords of low-income tenants are aware that there is subsidies available for rent. The tenants sort of carry that with them. If they move from one place to another, they can have their rent subsidized. And so ADSAB is to develop a communication strategy between themselves, low-income tenants, and the local landlords to ensure that they're aware of this subsidies for rent. And that again will begin this fall. Next slide. We're now talking about social development, and there was, quite a bit of concern about our youth. There was some events that happened this summer that, really made people say, hey, we need to do better things for our youth. They need stuff to do. And we do have quite a bit of sport activities in our community. We have a beautiful community center. But other than the sport activities, there seems to be little or no other recreation or leisure activities for children or youth. And so we're to establish a working group to investigate, establish, and promote leisure activities for children with an emphasis on non-sport related activities. And we invite community organizations to participate. So there have been a couple of organizations kind of starting, either with the churches doing things or, oh goodness, can't remember the name of the organization, but COMEX, I think it's called. Anyways, they are starting to try and do more of the arts type of activities. But we want to do something a little bit more formalized and make sure that there are things available for youth and children. And so the municipality is to establish that group. There's also a number of sport activities in the area. You can change slides, that was fine. But many families cannot afford the cost of participating in some of the activities. So we would like to see the availability of the Jumpstart program that's offered by Canadian Tire, advertised more vociferously, I guess, but just so that everybody has a chance to apply for it. And also ADSAB also has extra funds for providing to low-income people. But it's one of those things that if people were aware of, they may participate or access those funds a little more easily. Next slide. And our last thing in social development. And the seniors have been working on their age-friendly plan, and quite a bit of work, I believe, has been done with that. And they've now reviewed it because it's been a number of years, and they've created a high priority action plan. And the municipality is going to continue to support the realization of the actions described in the high priority action plan as necessary. So once that is approved by council, we will continue to work with the seniors. So that's an ongoing activity. Next slide. So our next steps, I only got a couple minutes here. We need to have the plan posted on the website as a draft plan. It should have been up on July 1st, and here we are into August. So as long as this draft plan is approved as a draft, it could go up on the website. We need to hold some community information sessions regarding the plan this fall. Those, of course, were all put on hold due to the pandemic. We need to make any changes to the plan that may result of this meeting or of the community sessions. And then we need to approve and post the final version. Next slide. Okay. So that's in a nutshell, done very quickly. That was how the plan kind of came out. So does anybody have any questions for me or comments or thoughts? I can't hear.
That's okay, I can ask her. I just wanted to know, she said ADSAB had funds available?
Beth, can you hear?
I can't hear. Could we use the chat perhaps?
Muted.
I have my thing turned up. I'm going to double check. Yeah, my sound is at the highest it can go.
Can you
Here now, Bev?
Oh, I can hear you now. Yep. Sorry.
Deb, it's Mitch. Did you say AdSat had funds available for children that needed money to get involved in sports?
They do have, so if you have a low income family and they are being assisted at all by ADSAB, they can go to ADSAB, yeah.
Questions?
I'm sure they would have to, you know, fill out their paperwork and all that. They're not just going to pass it to them, but yeah, they do have funds for things like that.
I think you guys are doing a great job. Keep up the good work.
Bev, can you hear us?
Yeah. I'm trying.
Just that I think you guys are doing a great job over there. I hope you keep up the good work and get it finished soon.
Yeah, so what I guess, what we'd like to come out of this meeting is that the draft either be approved as is, or if there's some, you know, I mean, I don't want to have the whole thing revised, but if there are some small changes or something we'd like added, I don't see a problem with that. And then probably in September, we'll start planning community things. So just let me know where you want to go, and if you need some time to chat about it or anything, that's fine. Just let me know in the next couple of weeks and where we'll go from there.
We'd like to thank you, the members and the committee, for working to complete this report. We'll bring this forward in the September meeting for council adoption.
Okay. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. And I hope I gave you a good enough overview. I didn't want to just go through the whole darn report again, but you do have a copy of it, I hope, so you can. And if you have questions, you can always ask me, call me, whatever. You know where I am. So is that it?
Thank you very much.
Okay, good night. Take care. I hope you enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you, Bev.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Number 5, adoption minutes. Approval of the minutes for a court meeting of Tuesday, July 13th. We have a mover. All in favor? Motion carried. Move on to number 6, business arising. We're seeing in this none. We'll move on to item 7, new business. 7.1, Alex Patterson, report for months of June and July. Alex, can you speak to your report, please?
Absolutely. So combine 2 months into one because I missed out on last month's report, so sorry about that. Couple of the highlights of the reports. The first one, we finished the light install for the LED lighting at the community center today, actually, which we're really happy about because it's been a long time coming. I don't have full permission to say who yet, but it is in the report for council's information. But hopefully that permission will be coming very shortly. So I'm sure it's not a big deal if anybody tells anybody. It's probably somewhat common knowledge, and we're certainly really appreciative of that sponsor and can't wait to do a press release and recognize them formally. It just has to go up their chain of permissions. So other things, we completed the community center reopening plan. That's in 7.2, and I'll go through the highlights of that for council. I'll be honest with you, we already have a couple changes that we'd like to make to it, but either way, it was relatively time consuming to go through some of the newer legislation. We had several backs and forth with Wawa Public Health who are trying really hard to be helpful to us, and they've done a really good job giving us advice, but there's a lot of legislation that changed that we had to go through. But it comes out of it with the plan that we're confident going into September that we'll be able to offer programming to the community. In terms of things that are happening in our parks, I've got a list of some of the projects that we worked on, as well as in one of the appendixes, a bunch of photos, and those are the same photos that folks would have seen on social media if you're following our Wawa Recreation page, or some of the stuff that we've done this year, as well as some statistics for the marina itself. So we put together some data that council could take a look at for how much the marina is full. So we're at pretty close to 50% of people who are seasonal people who are booking the marina slip for the whole season. And then of course our peak right now, which is the salmon derby weekend and pre-fish is full. We're at 98% capacity, and those extra couple slips are slips that folks don't really want because it's hard to turn into them or whatever it may be. So other things that we did in June, we had a really successful participation program that we were really happy with. That was a partnership between several community organizations, including the department. And that's something that we ranked 4th provincially, which we were really excited about. We had a crack at $100,000. We didn't get that, but we were able to put in our bid, and we're looking forward to doing it again next year, maybe having the same kit again. After that, we've been operating summer recreation programs. We did things fairly differently this year than we've done in previous years, where we tried to offer a different thing every night of the week that appealed to a couple of different demographics. So we had like a sports night where we didn't just do one sport, we did a different sport every single week to kind of mix it up and get kids exposed to different things. We had stand-up paddleboarding on the lake. We had a youth night where we did some more arts and crafts things, some nature-based things, a lot of different than just like the soccer, baseball that we used to offer, as well as we've been getting some pretty good capacities in terms of booking, 90 to 100% on most of our activities that we've offered, which we're quite happy with. Obviously, this year was tough because we had capacities. In previous years, we just kind of ran open door. So we had a lot of help from a couple of volunteers, a couple of local high school kids who were trying to get their hours. And that was really nice to see some younger kids interacting with some older kids and having them help out in the community. I have some statistics as well there on social media engagement, and that's followed up with another appendix, which has sort of graphs and charts about how many posts we're doing and where we're doing things. We've recently revisited our Wawa Recreation Instagram to try and hit a little bit of a younger demographic, some young families who are using that more than Facebook now. And so that's been somewhat successful. And of course, Facebook is our primary sort of social media approach. And then most of the things that we've been doing on Facebook, and especially the stuff we're advertising, we're also putting in all the local media. So it's not just social media, but you'd be able to find that in multiple sources. And then I think the last thing I'll talk about is the Tourism Ambassador Program. So you've probably seen, if you saw a little blue tent in front of the Tourist Information Center, those are our tourist ambassadors. That program has been somewhat successful. I'll be honest, at first it took a little bit of tweaking to figure out where the most successful places would be. But what we've been doing is we've been having those ambassadors go to a bunch of different locations and take statistics on who's there. And we found that, there's certain times of day where going to Lions Beach is essentially useless for us to do because there'll be 3 people there, or there'll be a whole bunch of locals and you're not seeing tourists. So a lot of the start of it was information gathering, and now we've got a better base of information to work on. So we're kind of hitting a lot of the locations based on what we've seen over the last month has been most popular. And of course, now with the American border opening, that's going to change again too. So really this year has been trying things, information gathering, and trying to do our best to give information to people without the facility open. So that's the gist of the last 2 months. Any questions?
Yeah, I have 2.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, I've been researching quite a bit on winter sports, and currently in many communities, they're asking people to be double vaccinated. Are we going to look into that?
So I can talk about that a little bit in the reopening plan, but the gist of it is right now, what we're seeing is we're not seeing the legislation to back that. So that becomes a political decision. So as a staff, we've discussed it and we've said, just like everything else we've done in the reopening plan, if we got a recommendation from a public health to do that, or if we got a piece of legislation from the province that said something like that, then we'd move to council and say, this is what we recommend to do. But we haven't had that yet. So at this time, we're not recommending it, but council can decide otherwise.
Do they have committees? Do they have executive committees, currently and all that?
Yes, yeah, and so individual user groups could, in theory, ask that as part of their membership, and that would be up to those individual users. But at this point, we're not recommending barring any user from the facility, which would be our role.
The Marina new dock, is that still gonna happen?
Hopefully, yeah. So right now, what's happening is there's a 30-day waiting period where the project is essentially put out to the community as part of the federal sort of steps you have to go through to approve things. And that 30-day waiting period ends on August 20th.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I believe so. I think that there's definitely been a reduction in terms of having a person there all the time like there used to be, so that's factored into things. On the flip side, I've only had one complaint about booking a slip with the community center, and that was really related to having to come all the way up to the community center from the marina. But I think as the message got out that you have to do that, we've had more and more people call us in advance of when they're going to show up, and we've been able to serve them pretty effectively, in my opinion. I think that's backed up with some of the numbers, right? So the seasonal slips, of course, those are mostly people from the community, and they got the message pretty quickly, and that was easy. The hard part was getting that message outside of the community. So to people who were coming potentially from Chapleau, Duperville, to come for a weekend or rent a month in August where they normally salmon fish, there was some people who just showed up and were expecting the normal service because they hadn't got that message, but they were able to come to the community center. We were able to process their passes, and it wasn't a huge issue.
Alex, are we closer to that restaurant, like, to that place yet? Are we
Yeah, so
making progress on that?
we're working on the proposal right now, but good news from Small Craft Harbors is that we're essentially next on the list. So they got, I want to say $350 million, but don't quote me on that exact figure, but a significant chunk of money from the federal government. And a bunch of that was for divestitures. They weren't sure how much at the point that I was talking to them, but that pushed forward a lot of the schedule. So I've been in contact with them probably once every month to 2 weeks over the summer to talk about the proposal, to talk about what we're doing and what we're proposing to them, essentially, with the goal of having a proposal for council to review in mid-September, let's say, to go to to basically Small Craft Harbors and say this is what we're looking for and start the initial negotiations by the end of September. So with that in mind, we're really hoping that at the end of the calendar year, we'll be able to have something rock solid between us and them for either the next fiscal year or the next calendar year, depending on what their funding actually looks like. And that they haven't fully figured out yet, but realistically within 1 to 2 years, we're looking at a funding agreement from Small Craft Harbors. And then our plan as a committee and as staff is to take that funding agreement and use that as leverage against FedNor and the NOHFC to bolster some of the municipal resources that we need to repair as well.
Yeah, in my feelings about that, personally, we really, you can't build a house without owning a lot. So the first step to that whole project is for the community to own it.
100%.
And then you can start your plan.
Absolutely.
Till then,
Yeah.
it's kind of
And without that divestiture agreement, a lot of the stuff that we would try and do, I don't think would be looked favorably upon with OHFC and FedNor, who we're going after for this, because all of the funding, and I haven't done a ton, but all of the funding that I've done, it has to be on your own property, right? So like the waterfront project, for example, right? That they would only fund activities that were on our property, and they wouldn't fund us to do something on private property or on another land. It had to be ours. So I would totally agree with you. It's the exact same principle here.
And I do like what I see go on, even though COVID is hard. You see lots of activity, beaches, parking lot, playing road hockey. It's just nice to see this whole activity going on. So that's so well done.
Thank you.
And also your social media. I know my wife loves it. I get lots of comments from lots of people that don't know what's going on here sometimes, but it's out there on social media, so they look at it and they really enjoy it.
Awesome. It's really
And one other thing I just wanted to ask you about is all my favorite thing is, is there any sign or Get a digital sign for that. NTC,
Yeah, so a couple things. So Maury and I have talked about putting back the Trillium grant again, because they've opened up a second set of applications for it. So those applications, you don't actually get the form to open it until September 1st, and then it's a 1-month application from September 1st to September 31st. So we've discussed our intentions to apply for that. And likely what we're gonna ask council, essentially the next capital budget, is would council be interested in funding it, whether we get the funding or not, because it would be the conditional. And so if we get the funding, hey, that's great, we go ahead and do it. But if not, you know, it's a really good tool to have in our arsenal, being able to communicate with the public. And so if council is really interested in seeing it, there is potential to use capital dollars, and of course that would be up to council.
and then you're right about, you can put anything on there you want, messages, but as we drive into town now, it's looking impressive.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting digital signs. We don't have one yet. And I would think it'd be really, you know, like you get a cancellation,
Mhm.
you just run the thing and it goes across it.
We've also got opportunity that we haven't explored that much in the past several years, at least our department, for potential private funding as well. And so we haven't asked some of the larger companies and the mines that are starting to be in our area. So it's something that we've talked about as a staff, are, you know, to not just go after the usual FedNor, NOHSC Trillium, but to look a little broader and see if we can fundraise in the community, things like that too.
Thanks. Okay, we'll move on to, you're up again next. 7.2, the reopening of the MMCC.
Absolutely. So 12-page document. Sorry. It's substantially similar to the green zone of last year, with a couple exceptions that are essentially more relaxed. So the basics are all still in place. Everybody still has to wear a mask, social distance, sanitize their hands when they come in, sign in, everything that everybody's essentially used to now. A couple of the things that have changed, last year, the facility was what had a capacity. So we broke the arena up into 4 sections, and each section we call it its own self-contained facility. So we could have 4 things happening at once, because the facility was limited to 50 people, you know, in total. So we don't have facility capacities anymore. Now we have capacities that are based on rooms, and those capacities are based on 50% of the fire capacity, or however many people you can get in there with 6-meter distancing. So what we said is we're going to pick the lower of those 2 numbers to be safe, and that's what our room capacities are. So we don't have to worry so much about you know, people going in different sections of the facility or crossing sections or things like that, because the new legislation says that hallways don't have to have a capacity anymore, whereas they did last year. So that sort of thing makes it a lot easier. The second thing that's in the legislation that's different from last year is the cleaning requirements are much more relaxed. And I believe, though I'm not a physician, I believe it's because they're finding that things like masking and distancing are much more effective than how many times a place is cleaned. So what they say is you have to clean to the point where you maintain sanitary conditions, which was the same requirement we've always had at a community center. So what that allows us to do is it allows us to compress the scheduling a little bit, because we don't need such strict buffer times to make sure people aren't passing in the hallways and we have time to clean and things like that. So that's going to allow us as a community center to allow more programming to happen, because we don't have to space things out so far, and you know, you have more hours in the day to work with. So those are the major changes. A couple of the changes that we talked about as a staff quite recently, and we're probably going to recommend, is instead of having limits on, like, you have to come dressed and things like that, switching that to time limits specifically for the dressing rooms, and allowing people to set their own rules as user groups and as teams, you know, within that. Obviously, there's some things that are still going to be closed. Showers, saunas are just off limits right now. But for the most part, as of right now, we're expecting for a little bit lax rules, and we can do a little bit more things and have a little bit more flexibility between those. So that's all written in the plan. We're coming out with cheat sheets, which are going to be the plan condensed into 1 page. So it's really easy for people to read and refer to. Like I said, not hugely different than last year, which is nice because most people know and understand the rules and are able to follow them. And then after that, honestly, we're going to wait for some changes. Our expectation as a staff is that there'll be some minor changes to this in September. Hopefully they're minor and not major. And then just like last year, you know, we have to take it by ear and look at new legislation and recommendations as they come in.
Yeah, I think your plan's gonna consistent or constantly change. Any questions, Charles?
Just one, Mr. Dick. I'm not sure your numbers, but are we going to be able to, for example, hockey, are we going to be able to play other teams from the town?
So we're still waiting on guidance from that. The guidance last year was you shouldn't be playing teams in other health units, which obviously limited us a huge amount because the team we were most used to playing was Shapley, and they're in Sudbury Health. So we're expecting to be able to host other teams, but we're not sure yet because we're waiting for direction, partially from the health units and partially from NOHA. I don't know, Kathy, was the letter attached to this that we received, or is that a separate item?
It's a separate item.
Okay.
But it's not on this agenda if you wanted to
Okay.
just. address
Yeah,
it.
so broadly, we received a letter specifically about vaccinations and letting people into the community center. And the answer that I gave as part of the last report still stands as our staff recommendation, which is essentially until we get direction from the province or from the public health units to make that a reality, we're not going to recommend it at this time. My understanding from Maury is that there's still things that are working their way through the courts as to whether it's a human rights issue or not. So then it kind of becomes a political issue. So for us as staff, we won't recommend it until we have a recommendation from an authority to do that. But council may decide to do something like that at their discretion.
Can I ask a question? Can you ask the question of your employees, have they got vaccinated? Can you ask them that? I don't know, that's,
I'm going to defer to Kathy on that. one.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
and that's what I'm saying, so sometimes we're worried about people coming into the facility, but maybe our own staff is vaccinated. And that's where you get that catch-22,
Mhm.
it's kind of sort of, that's what we're talking about. It's not legislative, things, so you infringe on people's rights to do that kind of stuff.
Where my children work, they have to be vaccinated.
Well, I guess that's a condition of employment, though. I don't know,
That's what the Ontario,
yeah. So, unless it's legislated, like you said.
they can't force you, but they want you vaccinated.
It's your own, but your life up there, they don't have the right to tell you. Every day there's human rights.
So
This is a contentious
Yeah.
subject.
Yeah, and I-
They're
where you
asking
go.
them to be vaccinated.
I think that's where, as a staff, the stance that we're recommending to council is to wait for legislation. Obviously, you see other provinces debating it as well, whether they're going to have vaccine passports and whether you're going to need a passport to do X, Y, Z, whatever. And as a staff, we're pretty happy to leave that into their hands
And then
and follow
this-
direction as we get
This
it.
Delta virus is gonna come in and change the whole thing again, so we don't know, so let's just leave that at that, or we can continue all night here.
Yeah.
We'll go to 7.3, Kathy has, the clerk has provided some information on council vacancy options, I'll let Kathy speak to that.
So I have a report that's approximately 20 pages long, just slightly longer than Alex's, but I won't go through every single page. So council a while back had asked me to advise them of options that are available with respect to filling vacancies on council. So council has two options. Either they can appoint a new member or they can have a by-election. However, when you're appointing, there are multiple options to appoint. So one option would be is a direct appointment where council could choose whoever they wish and place them as a member of council. Second option would be to have members of the public apply to fill the vacancy. And council has the option to interview, whether it be in person or during a public council meeting. Or the third option would be to appoint a member from the last election from, for example, 2018, the runner-up would have been Kathy Cannon. So in order to move forward with if there's a vacancy, a member of council would have to resign in writing. And at the next regular meeting of council, they would have to accept that resignation and declare the seat vacant. At that point, the clock starts ticking. Council has 60 days after the declaration to decide how they're going to fill that vacancy. So whether it's going to be through appointment or through by-election. I put in my report for your information, the different vacancies that we've had on council. And I went back to 1979, right up until current. So I didn't want to go too far back, but I could have. I could have went back to the 1950s, but I figured 79 was far enough back. Again, if council is looking to fill a vacancy, the individual would have to meet the requirements to be a member of council in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act. So for example, they would have to reside in Wawa, be a tenant in Wawa, or be the spouse of an owner or tenant in Wawa. They must be a Canadian citizen. They must be at least 18 years of age and not prohibited from voting in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act or any other act. An example of that would be not filing your financial statements following the municipal election. So if you hadn't filed your financial statements, you're not eligible to run in the next municipal election, which means you would not be able to run to fill a vacancy on council at this time. I talked about the appointments, a by-election. So a by-election may appear to be the best choice when you're filling the vacancy on council, because it shows a democratic process and allowing the public to choose the next person to fill a vacancy. However, if we were to use or to go with a by-election, the timelines would probably bring us into early January. If a person was to resign, let's say in September, that would bring us into January with a 30-day nomination period, or into February with a 60-day nomination period. So it is quite lengthy. The cost to conduct a by-election is exactly the same as it would to have a regular election. The election in 2018 cost us approximately $17,000. So what would happen is if we had an election, a by-election, it would fall into 2021. And so in essence, we would have two elections in 2021, and it would end up costing the municipality $34,000. And we would have to raise the $17,000 that we had already put aside for the upcoming election for this by-election. And again, as I mentioned, the by-election would ensure democracy, having community involvement with the selection process, and that's why it appears to be probably the most favorable. But again, the options are appointment by filling in the position with the fifth candidate or the fourth candidate for councillor. Appointment by application, similar to what we did in 2015. The cost to do that would probably be in the vicinity of about $300 with advertising in local media. Or the by-election, which again, I mentioned would cost about $17,000 to do. So those are the options that are available. We need to keep in mind that we are now 32 months into the current term of council, and there's approximately let's say 16, 18 months left in this council, this term of council. So there's not a whole lot of time remaining. The next election will be held in October of 2021.
Any questions?
Yeah. One system. You already coach.
So prior to preparing my report, I had reached out to the candidate that came in fifth, which is Kathy Cannon, and I asked her if she was interested. She said she would be. The next thing is I wanted her to know that she is named in my report, and I didn't want her to be surprised if she heard my name publicly. So I wanted her to know that this was occurring tonight. I would be talking about her. Her name would be mentioned. So she is aware that I had this report come forward.
But she was willing to.
Yes, she is.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will leave this with council to digest, and if they need more information, we can bring this back to a future meeting for further discussion, if and when we have a vacancy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
move on to 7.4. Alex,
So just a quick one, as part of our purchasing policy, things that we do an RFQ for that are significant amount of money, i.e., $50,000 of this one needs to go to council for approval. In this case, we completed an RFQ. We received one quotation from a single bidder. We reviewed previous pricing from other projects to compare that pricing with the pricing that we received. Obviously, there is more expense this year, mostly because of lumber, but other things are expensive as well. And so we felt like this was a reasonable price given the previous prices we had, plus a little bit of inflation for essentially COVID pricing. And so we're recommending council essentially approve this quotation. So this is for the St. High Falls project. As you may know, we used to have washrooms down there. We removed them because they were defunct. The vault was cracked a couple years ago. COVID hit and it paused the project. And so we're basically catching it back up this year.
Get back in the same spot where it was.
Probably a little bit of a different spot just because most of the issues that we had with the vault in there, I believe were related to water coming off of the hill and freezing. So we're going to pick a spot with better drainage.
Any other questions?
Is that for this year?
Yes.
One question I wanted, after when I was reading the report, I caught up on the question and I answered it myself, but so it's the same type of toilet that's at Dr. Rose, because when you say composting,
Yes.
I went, oh, how many people was it?
Yeah.
So these ones get pumped, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
The RFQ does say composting.
I know, but
Yeah.
it's, I guess it is composting.
Yeah, not. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll discuss
No,
here.
because that's when I read the reports. That's, I don't know what any numbers on there, but I think how many people use that place. That's not gonna work.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, thanks for clarifying that.
No problem.
No other questions? We move on to 7.5, application FedNor for airport runway lights. Who's gonna talk to this?
Maury will
Lori,
speak to it.
okay.
Hello, hopefully everyone can see me from rainy Sudbury, but thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm presenting this report on the airport runway lighting on behalf of Dan Beach and Manuela Batovanja. The three of us have been working together. As Council may not be aware, that the runway lighting and the tarmac lighting is past its life expectancy and we can no longer get replacement lights. The lights are certainly a very important part of our airport. And given that we've been spending considerable money in our annual operating budget, trying to initiate makeshift repairs to our runway lights, we were advised through a grant from the federal government through the Regional Air Transportation Initiative Program that there was opportunity for the municipality to apply for the runway lighting replacements. Of course, in any replacement program, we would be looking at not just upgrading the lighting to LED to ensure more brighter lighting and energy efficiency. We would be looking at making sure our electrical was up to speed and that we could always service our airport users through times of fog and evening. So with that regard, we went and initiated a request for proposals. We received 2 responses. The project, based on the lowest bid, would cost municipality approximately $390,000. That bid closed on August 5th, and we are recommending that council appoint and accept the bid from TriStar Electrical Incorporated. The grant through the FedNor Regional Transportation Initiative Program is available to the municipality, and the staff have gone through a stage 1 application. We were approved to advance to the phase 2 program. And in the phase 2 program, the grant may provide up to 80% of the funding required for the airport runways. We are looking tonight for council's endorsement of our recommendation to apply to the FedNor program for that funding. And for the municipality share, it would come from our general reserve funds. However, we have initiated discussions with our local industries to determine if our industries and our airport users would help the municipality and fund our portion. So tonight, what I wanted to emphasize for council is that I am sure that all council understands how important our air service is to the businesses that use the airport, but to our medevac system for emergency services. So I'm asking council also tonight to approve that we apply for the grant, but should the grant be denied, that council approve that the municipality undertake this capital expenditure in 2021, even though it has not been budgeted for in our capital budget, that we would use our available reserve funds, which we have, to fund this program and it move ahead this year because it's so important. So our recommendation is that we apply for funding, we initiate the project, and we accept the lowest bid proposal from TriStar Electric. Thank you.
Any questions?
Concerned about that. If the airport, Maury, is so important, why it just popped up on us all of a sudden? It wasn't dealt with in the past, that something's coming to us?
That's an excellent question, Councillor Shea-So, and I think I can say that efforts have been made over the last couple of years through our asset management plan, where we are identifying more clearly what the priorities are, and through our budget process, putting monies aside for projects like this. But I think it is a combination of the fact that when we went to get replacement bulbs, they're no longer available. So that wasn't the case a year or two ago. So that's something that's come to our attention this year. And the fact that the government funding is available is very, very important for us moving forward. We could continue to have electricians create temporary solutions to our lighting program. It's not like our lighting won't work tomorrow or next week. We can find innovative ways to keep the lighting running, but because there is a grant available, and this grant is really coming out of the COVID situation, we want to take advantage of the opportunity to get the grant. But your point is well noted, and we are all, as an organization, trying to do better to plan for these expenditures in a more consistent way over time.
Being applied for now?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think this is one of these items that kind of pops up, and if we had an asset management plan in place 5 years ago, we probably would have caught this. But we all know that our growth and the importance to the airport is to every one of our families, people around. So yes, thank you, and I think we'll support that.
Thank you.
No other questions? Okay, thank you, Maury. We'll move on to 7.6, COVID council meetings, if Kathy wants to talk to us.
Okay, I'll keep it very short and sweet. Staff and I have reached out to Algoma Public Health with respect to the guidelines for reopening the council chambers to the public for our meetings. And they have indicated that, yes, we can open as long as we maintain that physical distance of 2 meters and to a maximum occupancy of 50%. We must ensure that we have signage in the foyer indicating that we have limited seating. So that would be out in the front entrance. And so prior to anyone entering, they'd be required to either hand wash or sanitize. They would have to wear a mask. They would have to sign the self-screening sheet that we have located out front. And again, the masking would be required. Staff will determine how many seats we can put in here, but we're kind of guessing again, because of the size of the room, it'll be limited capacity, probably 10 to 12 people maximum from the public.
What's the occupancy?
It's quite large, but it's the keeping that distance. That's the concern.
How's that figured out?
We're actually going to try to measure. We're going to move this table forward.
Yeah.
Fire code occupancy.
Fire code?
Yeah, but the number is, I believe, out front.
Fire code occupancy is 1 person for every 1/4 inch of doorway.
Also, it's
Yeah.
usually by the door.
Yeah, which is how you get the capacity of 1,000 for the arena for the fish derby when we open up the back garage doors.
Okay.
Order each,
Quarter inch of doors, one person.
quarter each. That's a pretty small square.
Interesting.
Okay,
Well, we can't fit that many here.
okay.
So we're
Well-
proposing that we reopen the doors to the public for our meeting in September. So effective Tuesday, September 7th, our meetings will be back open to the public. The public will be required to mask when they come
Are we going to continue with
in. Zoom will be available. We do have that ability in our procedural bylaw where council and/or staff can participate through electronic means, and we will continue to do that because we know we can't open the doors to 100% capacity. So we will continue to live stream our meetings.
So we're gonna get a TV on the wall or something, so we have that.
Actually, we have some of the equipment in this room as we speak, just need to be installed.
No,
Yes.
okay, no, that's good. That's, I mean, the
So,
future.
so we're moving in that direction, yes.
Yeah, especially if one of us are sick, we
Yes.
can't make a meeting, but we can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Item number 8, we're gonna move to in-camera session.
No,
No,
no, there's nothing there.
the regular. Oh, sorry. Oh.
Sorry.
Okay. Number 9. Business right at the previous meeting, there's none. So the next meeting will be Tuesday, September 7th,
Yes.
2021. We'll call this meeting to close. Can I have a mover to close the meeting? Release. Meeting is now closed at 7:41. All in favor?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Ready? Okay, we'll call to order. No members present. This meeting is called to order at, this will be our regular council meeting at 7:42. Note all members present. And the mayor's away due to personal reasons. Okay, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Does anyone have any pecuniary interest? If so, declare it. None. Seeing none, let's move to the next item. Approval of agenda. That's a motion.
Moved by Councillor Reese, seconded by Councillor Hatfield, resolved that the agenda for the regular meeting of council scheduled for Tuesday, October 10th, 2021 be approved as presented.
All in favor? Motion carried. Delegations, there's none. We'll move into the next item. Announcements. Does anybody have any announcements? Okay. All members, I have one announcement. There will be a special meeting, council meeting on Tuesday, August 24th. For Wayfinders consultant report that the council will review. Any questions?
The meeting will be at 6:30.
6 or regular time.
Yeah.
And the next regular council meeting will be held Tuesday, September 7th. And there's a number of 5.2 to 5.8 are happening. Go to number 6. Adoption of minutes. Kathy will read the motion.
Moved by Councillor Hatfield, seconded by Councillor Reese, resolved that the following minutes of the meeting of council be adopted as presented. Minutes of the regular meeting held on Tuesday, July 13th, 2021, as contained on pages 1 to 6, inclusive of the minute book.
All in favor? Motion carried. Correspondence, 7.1, the Ministry of Infrastructure Program. We're glad to see you received our power dam special payment allocation for 2021. That's great news. I think that's a pretty big support for this community. A good chunk of change. We'll go number 8, consent agenda. Approval of consent agenda.
Move.
Read the motion, sorry.
My apologies. Moved by Councillor Reese, seconded by Councillor Hatfield. Resolved that the items listed under consent agenda, items 8.2 to 8.5, be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Motion carried. Number 9. Staff reports. Motion.
Moved by Councillor Reese, seconded by Councillor Hatfield. Resolved that the Council of the Corporation Municipality of Wawa does hereby receive the following staff reports, a copy of which are attached here too. A, AP 2021-10 report for June and July 2021. B, CC 2021-08 council vacancy options. C, MB 2021-06 application to FedNor airport runway lights.
All in favor? Motion carried. Business of item of the previous meeting, seeing none, we go on to the next agenda. Number 11, new business. To accept staff recommendation, RFQ 2021, number 2, installing composting toilets and steel roof at the scenic High Falls. There's a motion for that.
Moved by Councillor Reese, seconded by Councillor Hatfield. Whereas the Municipality of Wawa issued RFQ for the installation of a composting toilet, 1 two-bay washroom facility and steel roof for the scenic High Falls Pavilion. And whereas the municipality received 1 bid for the project, now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation Municipality of Wawa does hereby accept the quotation received from Kurt Geldart General Contracting Limited for the sum of $51,205 plus HST to install 1 two-bay washroom building and supply and install metal roofing to the existing scenic High Falls Pavilion.
All in favor? Motion carried. We want to 11.2, accept staff recommendation, application to FedNor for airport runway lights.
Moved by Councillor Hatfield, seconded by Councillor Chason. Whereas the regional air transportation is a vital service to the community of Wawa by providing such service as air ambulance, alternative transportation for area mines, support to the MNRF for its fire services, and economic growth for aviation-based businesses. And whereas the Wawa Airport runway lights were installed in 1988 and have surpassed their useful life, making it difficult to locate replacement parts to repair the lighting system. And whereas the Municipality of Wawa applied for funding under the Regional Air Transportation Initiative Program through FedNor, and whereas the RFQ was issued to supply and install new LED approach, runway, and taxi lighting, as well as remove and dispose of lighting infrastructure at the Wawa Airport. And whereas 2 RFPs were received, evaluated, and a recommendation made to accept the proposal from TriStar Electrical Inc., now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation, the Municipality of Wawa, does hereby direct staff to apply for funding under the Regional Air Transportation Initiative Program and accept the proposal from TriStar Electrical Inc. to complete the project at a cost of $391,264. And further, it is understood that if the municipality is unsuccessful with the funding application, then the essential project will be funded through general reserves.
All in favor? Motion carried. On to 11.3, accept staff recommendation in person council meetings.
Moved by Councillor Chason, seconded by Councillor Hatfield. Resolved that the Council of the Corporation Municipality of Wawa does hereby accept the staff recommendation to open the council and committee meetings to the public, effective September 7, 2021, adhering to the public health guidelines as follows: maintaining physical distancing of 2 meters and a maximum occupancy of 50%. Hand washing and sanitizing mandatory. No entry if showing symptoms of COVID. D, self-screening questionnaire to be completed prior to entry, and masking.
All in favor? Motion carried. Notice of motion, there was none. On to consideration of bylaws.
Moved by Councillor Hatfield, seconded by Councillor Chason. Resolved that the following bylaws be introduced and read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, and that the deputy mayor and clerk do sign and seal the same. Any rule of this council to the contrary notwithstanding. Bylaw number 3418-21 to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on the 10th day of August 2021. Bylaw number 3419-21 to enter into an agreement with Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Ontario for funding under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream, Local Government Intake Stream projects for the Wawa Sidewalk Improvement Program.
All in favor? Motion carried. Now we'll proceed to in camera. Motion for that.
Moved by Councillor Chason, seconded by Councillor Hatfield. Resolved that this committee proceed in camera at 7:51 p.m. in order to address the following matters: personnel issue, one item, employee negotiations, and it's related to labor relations and employee negotiations, and two, a personal issue regarding a noise complaint. It's related to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees.
All in favor? Motion carried.
Oh.
Okay, we have one more motion.
Okay, next motion is to close the meeting. And meet 20.
Move
Oh, wait, Kath.
Are you gonna do the business orders?
On the
out of close.
location.
Yes. You did catch me, my apologies. So as a result of the closed meeting, council has directed that a bylaw come forward to consider a new agreement with the USW for the outside workers. And the second item is to bring back the noise bylaw to the next corporate planning meeting for council to review and possibly revise. Thank you. So we'll move to close. Moved by Councillor Hatfield, seconded by Councillor Chason, resolved that the meeting close at 8:20 PM.
Okay. Motion carried. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.